Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this web event hosted by Automation Anywhere. The webinar today is about transforming insurance operations with RPA and intelligent automation. We're going to wait for 1 more minute, let a few stragglers join, and then we're going to carry on. So everybody should have joined by now. So welcome to the webinar, Transforming Insurance Operations with RPA and Intelligent Automation. There are 3 main topics today on our agenda to cover. RPA, the state of the art, how the technology works and where's it going. Insurance companies, how are they using RPA and artificial intelligence, especially in the current global context? And what are the steps to a good, robust implementation of RPA? Today's speakers are Ken Mertzel, Senior Director of Industry Strategy and Marketing for Financial Services from Automation Anywhere, and myself, James Denning, Chief Evangelist for Automation Anywhere. A bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted during the presentation, so if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box in your BrightTalk screen, and we'll try to answer your questions during the presentation or in a Q&A session at the end. If your webinar freezes for any reason, refreshing the BrightTalk webpage and the browser will usually fix the problem. Finally, a recording of this webinar will be available here on BrightTalk in a few days in case you missed anything or would like to refer to some of the points discussed today. Thank you. So Ken, let me hand over to you. Perhaps you'd care to introduce yourself a bit more.
Great, thanks a lot, James. So as James mentioned, my name is Ken Mertzel. I'm the Global Industry Leader for Financial Services and Insurance at Automation Anywhere. Prior to joining Automation Anywhere about 1.5 years ago, actually all of my career has been in financial services, primarily insurance and also in finance. Just before joining, I was at Bank of America for 15 years, half of that as CFO of their insurance group, and then most recently worked for the Chief Accounting Officer, managing financial operations. However, I also helped them implement the first proofs of concept of RPA within finance. So I can relate to the journey that many of you are going through. Before B of A, I was at Accenture in their insurance strategy practice, and before that at Progressive Insurance. So my role, just as I'm doing today, is to really help educate the industry about how the RPA can be applied in the industry and developing thought leadership related to that. So with that, as James mentioned, I do want to remind all of you, please do use the Q&A button to ask any questions, and we'll make sure that we get through as many as we can at the end of this. I'll go through the agenda first. So as James mentioned, first I'll just provide an overview of RPA, and for those of you not familiar in terms of just real briefly what it is, but more importantly, where the technology is moving going forward. Secondly, I'll spend time talking about specific insurance use cases. Again, not only in terms of how it's used in general, but also about how companies are looking at it in the current environment. And then lastly, just based on my experience and experience of working with customers, we'll talk a bit about what are some steps to successful implementation of RPA. And then as I mentioned, we'll try to leave at least 15 minutes at the end to answer all of your questions. So with that, let me start off first of all, for any of you that are not familiar with our company, I'll just tell you real briefly who we are. Automation Anywhere is the most widely deployed digital workforce platform. And I know when I was in industry, I was always skeptical because when vendors would come to talk to us, they would all say they're number one. And so, don't take my word for it. Take a look at many of the third-party research studies that you see listed here, and you can see the positioning in the marketplace. In terms of some of the statistics listed here, one of the things that really stood out for me is when I joined about 1.5 years ago, we had about 800 employees, and now we have well over 2,500. And I think it's really a testament to, again, the value that companies are seeing from using this technology in terms of being able to quickly add value and improve operations and customer service. The only other stat I'll mention here is that you could argue that we're actually the largest virtual employer. You can see we have over 1.7 million bots deployed, and that's in customers across the entire world. So again, it is very, very highly utilized. And what I'll do briefly is tell you a little bit about the technology and also more broadly, where it's being used across the world. So before I talk about RPA specifically, I did want to talk a little bit about sort of the automation continuum, and frankly, the term artificial intelligence is probably very overused in the industry, and so I want to kind of put RPA in context of sort of the AI terminology. And in my view, AI is really sort of a spectrum of technologies. So if you start in the far left in terms of process automation, this is technology that basically mimics human actions, and this is exactly what RPA is, and I'll give you a more detailed example in a second, but it basically acts on a set of predefined rules. As you move across the spectrum to cognitive automation, now you're mimicking human judgment. So it starts with a set of initial rules, but then evolves to actually leverage technologies such as machine learning to actually improve and adjust those rules over time. And then as you move to the far right, and you get to true artificial intelligence, which is really actually mimicking human intelligence, now you're starting to use very sophisticated algorithms that are actually sort of trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. So technologies you might have heard of like deep learning, or even the technology leveraged in autonomous vehicles would be an example of that. Again, the technologies on the far left, such as RPA, are very mature. On the far right, much less mature. There are some technologies out there, but far fewer that have been established. So with that, let's talk specifically about RPA. And again, for those of you that aren't familiar, RPA, I think the industry basically does itself a disservice using the term robotic, and that people often think of physical robots, but all it is simply software that sits on top of existing systems and performs typically very manual, repetitive, and rule-based tasks that are traditionally done by employees. So I often make an analogy to think of like an Excel macro on steroids. Again, much more powerful than a macro in the sense that, take the example of if you're an invoice processor and each day you log into a system with your employee ID, you download some information, create a report, upload it back into the system, and then send an email to your supervisor. The RPA software will do exactly the same thing at the click-step level. So it's often assigned an employee ID. It'll log into the system, do all the work that I just described, and can send emails, etc. So again, the point being that it helps perform those very manual processes and really frees up your employees to do more of the value-added work. It's based on a set of rules, and the difference versus traditional technology is that it integrates seamlessly with other applications. It typically can be deployed. A process can be automated within a matter of 8 to 12 weeks, as opposed to a traditional project, which might take months or years to implement, and at fairly low cost. You can see on the chart on the right that actually the technology has been fairly widely adopted in the insurance industry. Over 80% of companies have actually either implemented a proof of concept or actually deployed the technology. Whereas you can see much lower rate of adoption associated with true AI. I want to show you this study from Everest just so you understand the overall growth and size of the industry. And again, these are statistics across all RPA providers globally. And two things stand out here. First of all, you can see the tremendous growth in the usage of RPA. So RPA license fees have basically doubled from 2017 to 2018, from $350 million to about $700 million. And what's even more impressive is if you look at the projections for 2020, it's expected to grow to about $2.3 billion. In addition, you can see here the breakdown of the usage of RPA by industry. And what you can see here is far and away, BFSI, or banking, financial services, and insurance, are the highest user group of technology, well over a third, followed then by telecom and healthcare. In terms of how the technology is being used and where it's being used, not surprisingly, about over 30% of the application of the technology is industry specific. So, insurance applied towards insurance or underwriting, for example. But when you move beyond the industry specific applications, you can see that the most commonly used function that's using this technology across corporations is in finance and accounting, followed by contact centers. And I'll give you some examples as we go further into the presentation. So with that, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about our vision in terms of where RPA is going and what we refer to as a digital workforce. Because in our opinion, no one technology alone can really help provide true value to your employees. And so our platform includes 3 technologies together that form the digital workforce. First is RPA itself. We talked about that earlier. So again, the keys are rules-based. And then the key to RPA is that you have to have structured data. So that data has to be organized into databases or spreadsheets. And that's why we've then added a second capability in the platform. And it's really critical that you have a cognitive automation technology that, again, can not only act like a human, but think like a human. In this case, what we've added is technology called IQBot. So this enables intelligent data extraction. And by leveraging this technology, you can now access unstructured data, so data that's commonly sitting in PDF files or emails, be able to extract that data leveraging advanced technologies such as machine learning. But again, it's very user-friendly, so anyone can use it, even though behind the scenes it's very advanced technologies. And then that data, once extracted, can then be fed into RPA and process automation. And then the third component is being able to analyze results like a human. And so by way of example, within our product, there is Bot Insight, which provides smart analytics. And again, this provides you the ability to, in real time, analyze not only how your bots are performing, but also how your operations are performing, given all the data that you're flowing through the system. In terms of the RPA technology itself, it's also advancing. So traditional RPA started in more of an unattended fashion, meaning it was more focused on back office automation, and it basically ran in the background. So you would click off a bot, it would do its thing, and then you'd come back and get the results. But increasingly where we're seeing more interest going forward is in attended automation. Attended automation typically used in front office functions such as call centers. And what attended automation does is provides you the ability to have a true real-time human digital assistant. So we often refer to as human in the loop, where you can interact with a bot, for example, a CSR who's working with a customer can in real time pull up information across a variety of different systems and also enable communication across their team. And I'll give you another example of that later. And then the third technology, which is really taking off, I mentioned about cognitive automation, the example of intelligent data extraction. All 3 of these are key emerging technologies, and our platform has built all of those into the platform. So with that, let me switch over to talk about specifically how the technology is being used in insurance and give you some explicit use cases. So to provide a bit of context in terms of why there's so much interest in RPA, for those of you in the industry, you're familiar with many of the trends that are occurring right now. So insurers are typically under significant pressure. There are a lot of new online entrants and on-demand insurance being provided by companies such as Lemonade or Trove. In addition, all companies are heavily focused around how they can transform their operations, modernize operations, provide real-time, straight-through processing. In addition, in the insurance world, there's constantly regulatory change and evolving standards related to not only how insurance is provided, but how we handle data, accounting, et cetera. And then lastly, data management is increasingly focused around all financial services company. Insurance companies have no shortage of data, but usually the challenge is ensuring that that data is consistent, high quality, and also secure. So all these factors are driving increased usage towards technologies such as RPA. In terms of why insurance companies are specifically using RPA and how it's meeting with what they're trying to drive strategically, most companies typically focus on RPA initially to drive operational efficiency. So they're focused on eliminating manual processes, driving down costs. But as companies use RPA, they typically realize that there are significant additional benefits from RPA. first and foremost around improving the customer experience. RPA enables you to increase the speed and accuracy of interactions with customers, and which is really critical in managing customer experience. In addition, insurance is all about taking appropriate risks, and so leveraging RPA, and particularly its data handling capabilities, can improve analysis for underwriting, pricing, and fraud detection. In addition, RPA is often used as sort of the foundation for companies' innovation efforts. So often companies will start with RPA and then expand and add additional cognitive and AI capabilities over time. In addition to help, RPA can often help replace legacy platforms in terms of migrating data from one to another. And then lastly, this may be counterintuitive, but a lot of companies are looking at RPA to really empower human capital. I'd say it's counterintuitive because users are often concerned, is this something that will eliminate jobs and replace employees? And we really view it more as a digital assistant, similar to when laptops came out, and rather than replacing people, it really became an enabler. So typically RPA helps people become much more productive, and most importantly, enables them to focus on more value-added activities. So specifically, I'm frequently asked how RPA and where RPA is being used in the insurance industry. This chart shows you the typical value chain within insurance. And what I'll do is very briefly describe where it's being used, and then I'll show you some of the examples after this. So probably the number one area where RPA is being used in insurance is in the claims space. And I'll give you some specific examples, but particularly around first notice of loss. So again, getting all the information into a claim and getting it set up is just one example. Second, and probably almost equally an equal high area of focus, is around policyholder service. And RPA can be used not only for very standard handling very standard service requests such as policy issuance or renewals or cancellations, but also, as I mentioned, the example of attended automation. Increasingly, it's being used to help customer service reps assist customers in not only handling those requests in real time, but also providing value-added support in terms of identification of additional policies that might meet their needs. The other two insurance areas I've listed here, underwriting and agency management, are emerging areas of use. Underwriting in particular, in terms of leveraging RPA capabilities to help source and aggregate data that enables underwriters to then develop and price products. So this is really an area where I think there's going to be a lot more focus going forward, particularly in the commercial line space. And then in addition, for companies that have an agency force, RPA can be used to help, first of all, manage agency operations in terms of setting up new agents, managing their licensing and compensation, but also be used to enable agencies themselves to provide service to their customers. And then the last two columns here are not unique to insurance, but certainly data management is very critical to insurers. And as I mentioned earlier, it's frequently being used to help mine and validate data, migrate data from legacy systems into new core processing platforms. And then lastly, RPA can be applied across all corporate functions, finance, IT, HR. I've listed finance here just because it's often the organization that brings RPA into a company, particularly trying to lead by example. And within the finance function, for example, RPA is typically applied in reconciliations for the general ledger. It can also be leveraged heavily around accounts payable, invoice processing, and accounts receivable. So let me give you a few concrete examples of how it's being applied. So first of all, I mentioned about the usage within the claims space. This is a heat map that gives you a sense for the areas of potential opportunity for automation within claims, with the dark orange being areas of highest potential and the gray being areas of lowest potential, which is really driven by, again, the level of a manual repetitive process and data-intensive nature of those processes. So not surprisingly, for those of you familiar with the insurance process, the upfront areas of notification in terms of taking in all the documentation associated with first notice of loss, setting up a claim file, and then increasingly the ability to triage those claims to the appropriate adjuster are high areas of usage. In addition, in terms of verifying coverage, the RPA can actually look between the policy admin and the claim systems to do some verification. Again, intake all that data and extract the data from PDF forms that might be emailed in. And then also later in the process can be used to issue settlement notices and also actually execute payments after approval's been granted. In the current environment, as you can imagine, there's a tremendous increase in the number of claims coming to companies, unfortunately associated with not only life claims, but in addition, there are a significant number of claims that are likely to come through from travel insurance, but more importantly and more broadly related to business interruption insurance. And so there's a short-term opportunity for companies to really leverage the technology to handle that surge of volume, take a lot of the more routine quests, extract data from the emails and claim submission forms to reduce the manual handling of those, do the coverage verifications, and then the back end, again, it frees up from an outcome standpoint your claims adjusters to focus on those complex claims as opposed to some of the manual routine efforts and really help improve customer service. In terms of benefits from RPA overall, as you'd imagine, there's certainly benefits in terms of reducing the lost adjustment expenses, but frankly, some of these other benefits are even more important. So first of all, by automating some of these processes, it can really accelerate the claim cycle time, which is critical in terms of lowering the overall cost of claims, but also in terms of ultimately getting the much-needed payments out to the policyholders more quickly. In addition, it can increase the accuracy of payments to ensure that you're not paying too much or too little for a claim. And in addition, it really optimizes the utilization of your adjusters. So again, you can focus your claims handling professionals on those claims that are most complex and require their review. So next I want to focus on another example associated with supporting customer service in insurance. And for those of you familiar with the customer service function, they're often facing, as from a customer standpoint, a lot of inefficiencies in terms of long wait and call times. And then in the back end, a lot of that's due to the fact that CSRs have to do a lot of manual entry at the same time that they're talking to customers, which results in often errors. In addition, there are a lot of repetitive tasks that a CSR is responsible for, which distracts them from focusing on the customer themselves. In addition, because systems aren't often compatible, the CSR often has a situation where they have 6 screens in front of them trying to look at all that information in real time to get information not only about the customer, but also about the products and services that they have. So I wanted to give you an example around how attended automation can help address some of those issues and provide better customer service. So in this simplistic example where I'm showing, let's take the example where a customer might be requesting a simple change to their policy coverage. What would happen is, again, when a customer calls in, the CSR would trigger a bot that would basically access all of the information in real time associated with that customer. So it would obtain their transaction history, all the information about the products that they hold in their household, to provide that information in real time and therefore reduce the number of questions that a CSR might need to ask. Then after the CSR confirms that they're looking for a policy coverage change, the bot can help them quickly analyze different pricing scenarios based on the coverage they're looking for. In addition, in this example, it might trigger a cross-sell alert such that the CSR is alerted to the fact that there might be an additional endorsement or additional policy that might be valuable to this customer. So at the time the CSR is speaking to the customer, they can also ask about their interest in this additional policy or endorsement. And in this example, let's just say for whatever reason they were interested and it triggered some type of underwriting alert. Again, attended automation can enable the CSR to communicate in real time, in this case with an underwriter, could be a supervisor, get their real-time approval via the bot while they're on the phone with the customer, and therefore enable them to then get that approval, provide guidance to the customer, and basically complete the request not only for the policy change, but also for this new additional endorsement. So that's just, again, just one simple example of how attended automation can help the customer service function. And there are many customer service automation opportunities. I'm not going to list all these, but clearly you could think about examples not only in policy changes, but around claims from a status standpoint, address changes, billing changes, et cetera. So anywhere where you have interaction with customers, this technology can be leveraged. Next, I mentioned that this technology, has been used for years in the insurance industry, but there are a lot of very specific applications that our companies are looking for in the current environment. And so RPA is able to help companies address some of these challenges that are occurring as a result of the current pandemic. So I'll just give you a few examples here. Specifically in underwriting, there's an opportunity to really help analyze pandemic risk, and I'll show you an example of that shortly. In the claims space, we talked about the ability to really handle a significantly increased volume of first notice of loss. In the customer service space, as I showed you, all customer service representatives are really faced with a tremendous surge in volume, and not only in the insurance industry, but frankly in all industries if you've ever tried calling into a call center nowadays. And so again, the ability to automate some of those more routine tasks so they can focus on the calls that really require their assistance is absolutely critical. And in addition, similarly can help out agents who are also dealing with a variety of customer requests. As I mentioned early on, one of the areas where we see a lot of opportunities in terms of risk exposure assessment. And currently, companies are really trying to reassess their exposure to pandemic risks. Many policies don't explicitly cover pandemics, and so therefore, it's going to be critical for companies going forward to review all of their policy terms as well as their reinsurance agreements to determine their exposure and potential coverage. And more importantly, going forward, companies are going to be focused on developing new coverages or refining their current policies. And so the ability for RPA to aggregate all of that data to enable underwriters then to do that analysis is going to be critical. So in addition to insurance-specific applications in the current environment, really RPA is being used to manage business disruption across all corporate functions. Again, I won't go into all these examples, but you can see here across finance, IT, HR, customer service, and supply chain, RPA is being used by many of our customers to help manage a lot of the short-term challenges that they're facing, whether that's in finance related to liquidity analysis, in IT handling increased volume of requests for support and support particularly for remote workers, in HR in terms of providing timely communications to employees and tracking employee status, et cetera. So as you can imagine, a lot of increased interest across the business in using RPA. And I think going forward, once we move beyond this crisis, companies are increasingly going to be looking at technologies like this to learn how they can automate more operations so that when we get into another situation, hopefully not like this one, they'll be able to more quickly be able to handle increases in volume or shortages in staffing. So lastly, what I wanted to share with you are some of the steps that we've seen and some of the best practices associated with companies that are implementing RPA, and what were some of the things that they did to ensure successful implementation. So I boiled it down here to 3 specific steps. The first step is really associated with selecting the right processes. As I mentioned right up front, the key is to identify processes that are manual, repetitive, and data-intensive in nature, those that are going to be able to be rules-based. So if they require significant human judgment, you'll need to add additional technologies. But typically, when you're identifying processes, you don't need to look at a process that you can automate end-to-end. Typically, companies automate portions of processes and then enable humans to interact with the bot throughout the process. You also want to look at processes that are fairly mature. Processes that might change on a week-to-week or monthly basis probably don't make sense. But that being said, to the extent that you have a process that, let's say you're implementing a new core processing platform and the entire process might change in a year from now, companies are increasingly still looking at RPA to streamline those processes in the short term, given the fact that you can implement this technology in a matter of a month or two, and therefore get a lot of the benefits from automation even if you know down the road you're going to be changing your processes. That being said, you don't need to, unlike traditional automation, you don't need to fully re-engineer your process. To the extent you have a process that's very inefficient, it takes, let's say, 12 steps, but if you followed all those steps, you would get the appropriate result, then that's actually a perfect process for automating with RPA rather than re-engineering. Now, certainly if you have a process inefficient and if you followed all the steps, you would get a high error rate. Well, in that case, you certainly need to change the process before you implement RPA. Secondly, companies that are successful often start small and then achieve quick wins. So they'll often start with a proof of concept. It's really not to test the technology because the technology, frankly, is already mature and proven, but it's more to get the organization comfortable with RPA. So develop a demo, develop a video, help socialize what RPA is and what it can do across the organization, and then quickly be able to engage all the different businesses to identify RPA opportunities. Then after identifying and implementing some quick wins, then you really want to move more to finding opportunities for scale. You don't really want to do, tens and hundreds of POCs. You want to do one or two to sort of get familiar with it, and then really quickly look for opportunities to scale across your organization. And then lastly, you want to make sure that you're organizing for success. Some of the most successful companies in implementing RPA typically start out, maybe it's one business unit that is excited about RPA, we'll start it off, but then quickly as more businesses learn about it, you want to move and organize into a small centralized center of excellence where you have some key skill sets that can be leveraged across the organization. So obviously individuals who understand the nature of RPA, have some technical capabilities that certainly you're going to include people from IT organization in this. Another really key capability is program and change management. Just as you do with manual processes, you certainly need to maintain controls and change management over processes in place upstream or downstream processes change. And also that centralized team is going to maintain all the best practices and training, et cetera, that then can be leveraged across the organization. We typically see the most successful models are what we call a federated COE. And what we mean by that is, again, you have a small center of expertise, but then you appoint individuals across the organization, say appoint people in each of the businesses who are the leads and responsible for working with the business unit to identify opportunities. And it's real critical that they're working closely with people in the operations who really truly understand how the processes work, where the manual bottlenecks are, and can help identify what opportunities will work. And then they can help even in the design of the RPA. And then in terms of the development of the bots themselves, companies use a variety of different models. So initially, all the development might be started out in the center of excellence with IT support. But over time, companies, in terms of the ability to achieve scale, will actually push out development either into specific business units where they have some of those technical capabilities, or a high number of business cases that they need to implement, or ultimately even moving out to more broadly to others across the organization to build bots in what we call citizen development model. And that's really the best way to achieve scale. And the nature of the RPA platform enables you to do that in a very controlled manner. So even though you might have developers out in the business units, given the centralized control room as part of our platform, they need to leverage the development test environments built in, and they cannot put bots into production without centralized review by the COE in the control room. So that's where we found organizations been able to quickly scale to hundreds, if not thousands of bots, but still maintain governance and control over that process. So with that, I will hand it back to James. Again, just as a reminder, please do input any questions you have into the tool, and then we'll get to those shortly.
Thank you much, Ken. We have questions. We have a few questions, actually. The first one, which I'll answer, someone has asked if they can get a copy of this PowerPoint. Please reach out to us, whoever, it doesn't say who asked it, whoever you are, reach out to us, email us, get in touch, and we'll make sure you can copy. If anyone else wants a copy, just email us or get in touch with anyone at Automation Anywhere. There'll be contact details given at the end of this. So you can see Ken's email address, my email address, Ed Halsey, who works as part of our Europe team, email any of us and we'll make sure you get a copy. The next question is one, Ken, I wonder if you can answer this. How is RPA helping in underwriting or risk evaluation and assessment?
Yeah, great question. I kind of alluded to it earlier. And I think the key in terms of how RPA is being used is, again, it's absolutely not replacing underwriters and doing the actual underwriting itself. But where we see RPA really helping is, again, aggregating and preparing data to enable the underwriting analysis. So what I mean by that is, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of information, first of all, internally within a company in terms of customer claim data and other data associated with customers and their risk, but also externally in terms of a variety of different data sources, or even look in the current pandemic environment where there's all kinds of information about the spread of the pandemic, the severity of the pandemic in different areas. All that data can be accessed via bots. Again, it can access information not only from internal databases, but from external websites, and then structure all that data in the format that the underwriters need so that they can do the pricing analysis. And again, take all of that manual data aggregation work and then enable underwriters and actuaries to do their analysis itself. So increasingly, we're seeing more and more requests from the actuarial field for that very use.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next question, and again, I think this is one for you, Ken. If someone has asked, if I already have RPA, why would I consider switching or engaging with another provider? What differentiates the various options or solutions there are in the market?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, as we've seen, and especially out in Europe, most insurers, as I mentioned, because it's a mature technology, most insurers might already be using RPA and already have an RPA provider. So we often get this question about, what differentiates Automation Anywhere, for example, from other RPA solutions. And I'd say, a couple things. So one is, if a company already has RPA, I think most commonly the reason that we see companies coming to us is either because they're really unable to scale. So they might reach 20 to 30 bots and then they've kind of stalled out, or their platform doesn't have all the capabilities that I've described, and so therefore they need to contract with a variety of different organizations to get that. So that's why they typically reach out. I think the reason specifically why we see companies looking to use our product are fourfold. One is, as I mentioned, very easy to use and scale. So the fact that it's basically, even though behind the scenes very sophisticated, it's more or less drag and drop technology. So easy to build the code, if you will. You want to open an Excel spreadsheet, you literally slide that over and the code would be there. It's easy to read. And then easy to scale, particularly not only because of that, but also because of that centralized control room platform I described. Secondly, a real critical capability for our customers, the fact that we have some of those integrated solutions. So rather than having to go out and get an unattended bot company, an attended bot company, a company that can do intelligent data extraction or process discovery, or one that has, web-based deployment and a cloud architected platform. We have all that built in, so that's a real positive for our customers. And then third, I mentioned before, is the centralized control room. As you're all aware, insurance is a highly regulated industry, and so the fact that we have a control room that provides enterprise-grade security and governance over all the bots. So again, you actually have visibility centrally to all the productions in existence and control over when those go into production. It provides role-based access, audit trails, credential vault with all the IDs and passwords. We have data security credentials that others don't have, such as SOC 2 compliance. And then lastly, I'd say the fourth factor is the fact that we offer dedicated support and training. So not only training people how to get up and running quickly to use RPA, but also dedicated ongoing support. And that training can be either in person, or we have a pretty robust Automation Anywhere University online that can get people up and trained quickly. So I think those are probably the four factors that drive people to work with Automation Anywhere.
I think for me, out of those factors, the big one and the reason where I see people moving is the ability to scale, because as well as the functionality available in the platform, you talked about centralized control room, things like that, the ability to deal with maybe higher hanging fruit using artificial intelligence, which is a core part of the platform. It's all the other things around the platform. You've talked about training and sport, but things like bot store, the ability to buy rather than to build, to be able to take automations that other people have built and use them to jumpstart your automation journey. Things like discovery bots let you discover very quickly and efficiently what processes there are suitable to be automated, and actually start automating some of those without having to kind of craft everything by hand. I think there are lots of things around the edge of the platform as well that all kind of geared towards scale. Another insurance-specific question, Ken. Could we elaborate a bit on the claims value chain, where have there been shown the possible automation opportunities across that value chain? And also, could you explain a bit how RPA might be able to help reduce the physical verification process, which is normally done by third-party vendors?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So a couple different things in claims, and maybe I'll start off with that latter portion of the question around physical verification. So as most of you have seen, claims has really been transforming dramatically over the past year or two. And I think where RPA can play a place is, again, I mentioned sort of the interoperability between systems. So take, for example, there are a lot of third-party vendors that offer actually a digital and remote identification of damage. So whether that's drones that actually will look over a home for damage, or by leveraging individual customers' photos from their phone to take photos of their car. There are companies that can actually look at that information and actually develop cost estimates associated with that. So where a bot can play with that is again, interacting with those technologies. It can then take that data and feed the data directly into a company's existing claims and policy management system. So, I think bots are heavily used to act as connectors between systems, where historically companies have thrown bodies and people at doing that because it was too costly to automate in a traditional sense. So I think as these new technologies evolve within the claims space, bots can help actually quickly access that data and plug the information into into the insurance carrier systems. In addition, again, across the value chain, we see it in a variety of areas. I think while we see probably most of the effort around first notice of loss and getting the initial evidence in, increasingly companies are looking at it for example, their triage process. So assessing based on a series of factors, what is the severity of a claim, and then feeding some of those claims directly into a quick pay process, for example, to the extent it's a clear total loss or a very simple claim. And then on the back end, as I mentioned, in terms of issuing notices based on a set of rules, as well as ultimately issuing payments when the claims have been approved. So a variety of different uses across the claim space. I'll also say that increasingly where we're focused as well is that a variety of insurers are leveraging core processing platforms, such as, for example, Guidewire in the property casualty space. And so again, where we're seeing RPA being utilized is for some of the work that needs to be done around some of those platforms, like, for example, getting the claims data into a Guidewire type system. We're developing bots that actually can help enable customers to eliminate some of those manual processes, even when they're using another core processing platform.
So as well as some of the stuff you discussed about the kind of nuts and bolts of that claims management, what about the document management side for claims, claims documentation and also policy documents?
Yeah, good point. Well, for all insurance companies, they tend to be deluged with a high volume of documentation, particularly in the claims space, for example, in terms of individuals sending in information, loss forms, or sending in documentation associated with their loss estimates. Of course, a lot of that comes through online, but there's still a significant volume that's coming through via PDF, email, etc. And similarly, in the policy space, to the extent individuals are sending in particular documents, I'd say particularly in the commercial insurance space, where there's so much involved in terms of getting information from businesses associated with the nature of their risk and the nature of their businesses. And that's where the technology I talked about in terms of leveraging intelligent data extraction, or in our example, IQBot, can be really beneficial, because it can actually take all that data extracted, even if the forms change, so what one customer might send is different than another, the bot basically learns over time in terms of what types of data it's looking for, and even if the forms in terms of where the data is in different forms varies, it can still extract that data efficiently, and therefore, again, individuals in claims or policy service are spending their time answering questions and addressing the requests as opposed to rekeying that data into the core systems.
Okay, and then there's a question that I'll handle. Why is artificial intelligence and machine learning so important? Should we be starting there instead of with normal RPA? And Ken, after I've answered you, I'd be interested to your thoughts. For me, it's really about low-hanging fruit, basic RPA, if this, then that. That's the place you should start. Don't start with the hard stuff. Start with the easy stuff. If you can deal with some of the more obvious use cases, get those quick wins done, get that quicker, bigger return on benefit instead of diving straight in with AI. Having said that, nowadays, artificial intelligence, machine learning use cases, so maybe dealing with slightly softer, more unstructured data, that's pretty much table stakes. We think it's so much table stakes that it's now a core part of our platform. You cannot buy automation anywhere without having that artificial intelligence capability built into it. So I think as well as doing the easy stuff first, if you're not on a journey, an automation journey that has you looking at artificial intelligence, machine learning scenarios pretty much now or in the very near future, then that's probably a good indicator that you're behind the curve on this. So if you're not doing any sort of RPA, you really, really should be. If you're not looking at the artificial intelligence, machine learning stuff pretty soon, then you're probably a little bit late. Certainly your competitors won't be. Ken, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I agree with what you're saying. Again, I don't think it's really an either or. I think as the technology evolves, you're going to see increasingly that integrated, just as we've done in terms of integrating the AI and machine learning technology with RPA. That being said, I do think even basic RPA is here to stay in the sense that there are always going to be processes that need to be manual because, again, it's just not cost effective to automate every single process through traditional automation. And so rather than thinking about RPA as sort of a short-term fix, I think of it as something where you're always going to have that need where all core processing platforms can't do everything. So you're going to be able to leverage basic RPA, but increasingly AI, machine learning technologies are going to be leveraged. So when the exceptions kicked out that can't be handled on a rules-based basis, you'll be able to leverage that technology to determine how might I handle a majority of those exceptions and do more complex tasks over time.
Okay, we've still got a bunch of questions to go, but I have a question for everyone on the call. We'd like to do a very quick poll to find out, what you'd like to do after this call. So, Helen, if you could push that poll live, you should see on your screen any second now a poll. Please click on the one that best fits your thinking at the moment. That would be very, very useful to us. While you're doing that, we're going to go on to our next question. Ken, this is another one for you. How can automation help with the current disruption to our business, in fact, to everybody's businesses? What would you be doing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. As you can imagine, we're getting a lot of questions from our customers and prospects associated with that. So first of all, clearly everyone needs to focus on their short-term business priorities. So as the pandemic began, companies were focused on executing their business continuity plans and then increasing the ability to serve their customers via call centers. So I'd say right now it's sort of a focus on short-term business issues, and I've given you some of the examples. We're also working more broadly with companies to implement some of the, for example, government programs that are rolled out, and this is not just specifically within insurance. So enabling companies, for example, in the U.S., where there are small business loan programs offered by the government, so enabling banks to handle with that surge in volume, or increasingly helping financial services companies or even insurance companies who are deferring premium payments or deferring loan payments, and leveraging this technology to quickly recalibrate all the accounts associated with that. So I'd say certainly focus on some of the short-term business issues where it's going to provide you quick benefit and not overly disrupt your current operations. But I think increasingly, once we move beyond this crisis, companies are absolutely going to be looking at more longer-term opportunities to really accelerate their digital transformation efforts, as I mentioned before. So I think this is really going to be an opportunity for companies to look back and say, what are things that we could do that will really provide more stability to our operations so that we've automated more of these manual processes, so that way when there's a surge in volume or when there's a shortage of staffing, they'll be able to respond much more quickly. So that's why, right now, people should focus on taking care of your employees and taking care of your customers. But as we move on from this, I think companies should quickly be looking at how can they leverage technologies like this that will sort of mitigate the impact on their customers and their employees in the future.
Okay, great. We have a couple more questions. We've got the poll up. Please click and vote. It's really useful to us to know what your thinking is. Ken, question I think for you and also for me. You talk about some of the benefits, but do you want to just dig in a bit? Someone's asked, what are the key benefits from implementing RPA? Surely it's all around labor cost reduction. Is that true?
No, absolutely not. As I mentioned earlier, certainly companies look at that, and that's often a key driver. And it's not so much from eliminating labor. We typically see it as companies are really under pressure, especially nowadays, for example, where the demand is exceeding their capacity. And so they have a lot of open racks, or they just have positions that aren't filled. And therefore, they're really looking to expand capacity. So to the extent they free up time, that time can be used more effectively elsewhere as opposed to necessarily eliminating employees. But when you go beyond labor and productivity, as I mentioned before, really companies are looking at it, as I'm seeing, particularly in terms of, first of all, improving control and governance. So, I've seen many examples where a company goes to do implementation, they look at their process flows, and they find that there's an Excel macro built into the process that was created by someone who was with the company 6 years ago, no longer there, and a lot of hard coding in there. By automating those processes with bots, it creates a lot more transparency in terms of what you're doing, creates audit trails, which are really critical from a governance standpoint. And then in addition, this really can help, as I mentioned, around customer service, so really accelerate and improve the level of service and accuracy that you're providing to your customers. All are really critical benefits that we're seeing from customers utilizing this technology.
I think you're right. I think, there is a lot more to it just than that bottom line. A lot of benefits that we see from RPA do lend to that bottom line, and it's a lot more complex just than being able to reduce the size of your workforce. The normal scenario isn't that people lose their jobs. It's normally that you free people's time up to go and add value in other ways. So whether it's that or whether it's increased accuracy, stopping rework, better compliance, all of those things are useful. For me, the one that always gets forgotten, I used to work for Amazon, and Amazon prides itself on being customer-centric. If you see no other benefit in terms of cost and compliance, etc., but RPA enables you, all other things equal, to deliver a better product or service to your customer. It reduces, insurance claims payouts by 20% or 30%. If all other things stay the same, but you improve the service to your customer, that customer centricity piece, I think that's hugely valuable. The better you can serve your customers, whatever business you're in, the better it will serve you long term, and that's something we should never forget. We're coming to the end now. I would like to thank everybody for attending today's webinar. Ken, I'd like to thank you for your time. So the webinar today, RPA and AI Transforming How Insurers Do Business. It's great to see people taking an hour of their day to spend a bit of time with us here at Automation Anywhere. The poll is still up to understand how we can best help you from there, so please don't forget to vote. Several people have asked for a copy of the presentation. Simply click on the poll saying receive more information and we'll reach out to you, or you can always email Ken, myself, or Ed Halsey. As a reminder, we've added some helpful assets and links for you here in the room, so feel free to download those before you leave. And as I said at the top of the call, the webinar was recorded, and that recording will be posted here on BrightTalk probably within the next 24 hours. So feel free to get in touch with us directly. We look forward to hearing from you. And if you'd like to join us again for a future webinar, please visit the Automation Anywhere channel here on BrightTalk or follow any of us on LinkedIn. So for now, I'd like to thank you all. Don't forget to wash your hands and have a great rest of your day.